So tonight is the 31st yahrzeit of Reb Shlomo Carlebach, Shlomo ben Naftali. His neshama should have infinite aliyahs.
Amen.
And
what's mine with?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
That's wrong. Reb Shlomo.
Yeah.
Amen.
Wine?
There's so much crazy siyata de Shemaya that I've been experiencing with this new sefer. I started a new Rebbe. This sefer is called Chesed LaAvraham, and it's by a Rebbe named Abraham Hamalach, which is Abraham the angel. And keep in mind that he got that name from basically some of the greatest people who ever lived called him the angel, right? And
Melech is king, no?
Hamalach.
Malach. Malach.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So he, there are many stories about him, and I only know a few, but I can tell you that he was so holy, he was like not in this world. And he wore talis and tefillin all day, and he was mostly in seclusion, and mostly with the talis over his head. And so I was just thinking when I'm learning this sefer, and when we're, I'll say over some things, God willing, from the sefer, that when we're learning it, that what does that mean exactly? We're going. He was alone inside of his talis with whatever he was learning, Zohar, I guess. We're entering into his talis alone, right? That he's in seclusion 250 years ago. Somehow we get to go inside of his talis while he's in seclusion. So just to appreciate, just to visualize, like what his level of dveikuskite was, what his level of attachment, how beyond this world he was. And one of his, I'm really just in the beginning of learning him, but what I've seen is one of his themes is this idea that God created yesh miyayin, which means God created something from nothing. So, and that the job of the tzaddik in this world, of our job in this world, is to take the something of this world and to return it back to nothing. Meaning to say, to elevate every aspect of this world and to return it to its source, which is beyond the material realm.
To dematerialize.
Through uplifting it, through uplifting it. In other words, to see through the illusion that there is a independent existence to this dimension. So to turn something into nothing, to realize that the only thing that exists is God, and to return it all back to God, right? So not to accept the idea that there's anything other than God. That's what it means to take something and turn it into nothing. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So just to give you an example of just one bit of siyata de Shemaya, of hashgacha pratis that I've experienced with this book, it happened today. And those of you who come to the 613 minyan at the Happy Minyan, if you don't, I recommend that you just at least give it a try. It's really a great minyan. Very different, very special. A lot of Shabbos davening during the week, a lot of singing and dancing during the week, which makes it, unusual and special. Anyway, I give a little talk, like a 2-minute talk in the morning, like before we do Hodu. And I'll tell you what today's talk was. And just as an introduction to the Sefer. So we sing Sheyibane Hamikdash b'mehera v'yameinu v'seinu keinu v'torasecha. So we all sing it together. So I was inspired by that. So I said the following thing. I said, what's the connection between rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash and Mashiach? Because we know that there's a strong connection. In fact, the Rambam lists that one of the qualifications of Mashiach, or one of the proofs that Mashiach is that he's going to build the Beis Hamikdash. So if he doesn't build the Beis Hamikdash, then he's not Mashiach. So you see, it's one of many very strong connections between the Beis Hamikdash and Mashiach. Okay, but I just to be more pointed, this was the point I was saying. We know that the Zohar says that the whole Torah is in the word Breishis, and the word Breishis is in the Beis of Breishis. So everything is worlds within worlds within worlds. And the letter Beis of Breishis is darshaned as the word Bayit, Beis and Bayit. It's like basically the same word, Beis and Bayit, which means that this world is a house. This world is a house that houses God, or a house for God. Which means, basically, the Beis Hamikdash. When God created the first something, the first yesh from ayin, the first something from nothingness, he created one tiny point of matter. And the sages teach that point of matter was the foundation stone of the Beis Hamikdash. And then God blew it out. That was the Big Bang Theory. God blew it out, which means that the entire world, the entire universe, stems from the DNA of the Beis Hamikdash, which means the world is one big Beis Hamikdash. So the idea that the Beis of Breshit, the Beis which is darshaned as Bayit, is darshaned as house, is contained within the first letter of the Torah. But here was the real point. Okay, that's a direct parallel, but let's go a little bit deeper. The whole idea of the Beis Hamikdash is that it's very specifically constructed. Every aspect of it is a very specific measurement, and very specific things go on in it. So when you have your house in order, the entire universe is in order. And that's Mashiach. That's the point. The Beis of Breishis is the Beis Hamikdash, because when all of that is in order, the entire world is in order. And when the entire world is in order and everything is flowing harmoniously, that's Mashiach. Okay, so now I start learning VAYERA. And the first Torah of VAYERA in this book, I said that this morning. About 2 hours later, I open up VAYERA. You ready for this? What does he say? What does he want to talk about in VAYERA? The Beis of Breishis, and how the letter Beis also stands for bias, which means house. I mean, we're not in Breishit, folks. We're in VAYERA.
That's a book title.
We're not in Breishis, folks. By David Zach.
Dorothy.
Dorothy. We ain't in Breishis no more, Dorothy.
Okay, so what does he say? What does he say about that? So he goes and he says a letter. He starts talking about Lot. Now, Lot is a really,
He's a lot.
He's a lot. Lot is a lot.
No.
That's chapter 2.
He's absolutely, one of the most complicated figures in the entire Torah, because on the one hand he's a student of Avraham Avinu, and he's doing like the mitzvah of hospitality at the risk of his own life, and on the other hand he's become totally corrupted by Sodom. as in Sodom and Gomorrah. So, in fact,
Sort of like the Arabs, they're very hospitable.
yeah, but he didn't learn it from them.
No,
he
I know
learned
that.
it from
I'm just
Abraham
saying.
Avinu.
Yeah,
You know,
but they're
so
corrupt, same way.
yeah, but it's that would be understandable. Then it wouldn't be a contradiction. He learned corruption from corrupt people, but he learned holiness, and then the holiness got corrupted. It's different. It's a different dynamic.
Did Yishmael learn any holiness from Abraham?
He was making one. Tough cookie.
Well, they say Yishmael at the end is tshuva,
Right.
Because even though he was older than Yitzchak, when it talks about the burial of Abraham, it lists Yitzchak first and then Yishmael. And the rabbis learned from that Yishmael allowed Yitzchak to go first, meaning that he acknowledged Yitzchak as the true heir to Abraham, which was tshuva. So Yishmael must have learned that positive character trait from Abraham. So yes, what else he learned from him, I don't know. Certainly the oneness of God.
Well, probably hospitality, though.
Yeah, hospitality. So Lot I learned from Reb Shlomo was actually Abraham's protege, which I had never seen before. That he wasn't just his nephew, and he wasn't just someone who was kind of part of the family, but that Abraham really saw him as a spiritual successor of sorts. And so when Lot went to Sodom, that Abraham was completely broken. He was completely crushed. So you know the story. I read one very disturbing detail. It's a big question mark, which is that Lot, at the risk of his own life, offers hospitality to guests, because Sodom and Gomorrah is like, you give hospitality at the price of your own life. So he's willing to sacrifice his life, really, for this mitzvah. He doesn't know that he's housing angels. And then when the mob comes and says to him, give us those guests, and what are they going to do to those guests? They're going to physically abuse them. So when the mob shows up and says, hand over the guests, Lot inexplicably says, take my daughters. So again, you see such confusion in terms of his moral hierarchy, that he's willing to protect the guests over his own daughters. Now, he doesn't end up sending his daughters out. His daughters are protected. But I saw a medrash, and this is very troubling, but we won't spend much time on this. I'll just tell it to you. They say, because you offered up your daughters, you yourself are going to take your daughters. Which is what ends up happening.
Don't ask.
Oh, right. Got it.
So,
The X version.
which is, it's so twisted. The whole thing is so twisted. So, one simple thing that we can learn out from that is that, it says, justice you shall pursue. In other words, you have to understand justice. You have to understand how to do justice in just ways. It's not enough to be moral. Your morality has to be moral, right? And in order to do that, you have to learn it from the Torah itself, because you can learn morality and you can learn corrupt morality, which is scary in a way. So that's an advertisement that whoever you learn from, you have to learn from people that have real, actual Yirah Shamayim. Because if not, the morality that you're going to learn is going to be immoral. And if you need a better example of it, he's willing to protect the guests, but not his own daughters. So Avraham Amalek doesn't discuss that. Let's get to the point that he makes, because it's crazy deep. It's crazy deep what he says. The mob is closing in on the house, And now the angels strike the mob with blindness. And now the mob of Sodom and Gomorrah are like, in the darkness, trying to find the door of the house. Okay. So that's such a specific image. Now let's go underneath the talus of Avraham Amalek.
Mm.
Good transition.
Right? How does he learn that line? The blind mob is looking for the front door of the house. He says, do you know what it's talking about? People looking, standing at the entrance of the bays of Breshis, the first letter of the Torah, right? Because the letter bays is like, it's got an open door there. They're looking for the open door. Now listen to this. I stopped short before. I told you everything is worlds within worlds. That the whole Torah is contained within the word Breshit. And Breshis is contained within the letter Beis. But now this is the deepest. The letter Beis is contained within the dot within the letter Beis. Now what does that mean? Because that's what Avraham Hamalek says. He says that they're entering, they're trying to enter into the bays of Breshis in order to get the Yud. So the Pischei Sharm says the same thing, that dot inside the bays of Breshis is the letter Yud. And everybody knows that the letter Yud stands for Chachma, wisdom. But not just wisdom. You've got now, we'll put the thought aside for a moment, because right now you've got a Kabbalistic map of the universe, which is far out, okay? The Beis also stands for Bina, by the way. And so that dot is Chachma within the Bina. But that Beis is also stands for this world, because it stands for the word Bayit, and this whole world is a Bayit, okay? But now let's think of it in a more three-dimensional way. That dot is the Chachma Ilai. It's the higher Chachma. So now pretend you're up in Shemayim right now, and you're looking down on the world. And what's the signature of the world? The Beis of Breshit, which stands for the world, because that's the house which this world is, okay? That's the Beis of Breshit. Now we know God compacted his light until it became the material realm, or the outer dimension of his life, an aspect of his life. And I always tell you that this correlates with Einstein, E equals mc squared, that energy becomes mass. So divine light is energy. That's the ultimate energy. And God compacts that energy until it becomes mass. So the Torah exists beyond this world. Torah is not just wisdom. Torah is what the entire universe was made from. Remember, it says in the Gemara that the Torah existed 974 generations before the world was created. Now listen to this. That Yud inside the Beis is the number 10. That stands for the 10 Commandments, which contains the entire Torah. But listen to this also. That Yud is just the smallest fraction of what the heavenly Torah is. We don't have the entirety of the Torah. We just have, like, so to speak, a Yud from the Torah. The Torah is so expansive and so huge and so beyond that we have like a taste of what the entirety of the Torah actually is. So God takes, remember, let's go back to this idea of the map. You're looking up and you're looking down on the letter Beis. God takes his light, the Torah, and he condenses it down and he puts it in the world. That's the dot inside the Beis. So it's actually a map, not just of this world. The Bays would stand for this world, but the Yud is actually the light as it's filtered down from dimensions and dimensions beyond. And we've got a taste of it, and that's the Torah. Is that clear? Are you following that? Does that make sense? Go ahead.
No,
It's
good.
clear. So let's get back to Avraham HaMalach. He says the blind people are trying to get into the letter Bays in order to access the wisdom. So obviously he's not just talking about people who are vision impaired. He's saying that this world is made out of blind people. And the blind people are trying to find wisdom, but they can't even get into the front door. You know why? Because it takes wisdom to find wisdom. And in their blindness, they lack the wisdom in order to find the wisdom. Now, it says in another place, he doesn't bring this, at least not yet, and as far as I got in his teaching, but I'm adding this. It says elsewhere that God gives wisdom to the wise. And so there's a famous question on that. God gives wisdom to the wise, which is, if I'm not wise, how do I get wisdom? In other words, how do I join the wisdom club? God only gives wisdom to the wise, but if I'm not wise, how do I get wisdom? You hear the question?
Catch-22.
It's a catch-22. So what's the answer? The answer is in another pasuk. It says, Reshis Hachma, the beginning of wisdom, Yiras Hashem, is the fear of God. So how do you get wisdom if you don't have wisdom? If you have Yiras Shamayim, if you have the awe of God or the fear of God, then you can get wisdom. That's how people who don't have wisdom can get wisdom, through Yiras Shamayim. And what is Yiras Shamayim? So it's a lot of things, but basically it's a recognition of just how absolutely huge God is. You know, I quote Reb Shlomo all the time when he said this, because we have to constantly ask ourselves the same question. Why are you making God so small? Right? You know, I heard Rabbi Beryl Wein, Olav Shalom, say, he said this, that it's an old teaching from the rabbis, an old mashal, which is, he says, imagine a person is riding on a donkey, and you know, what was the great utility of donkeys, especially back in the day? You could pack a lot of things on your donkey, and the donkey it was a beast of burden, as they say. So can you imagine you're riding on a donkey, and you're holding two heavy suitcases while you're riding on the donkey? It's a very absurd image. Like, put your bags on the donkey. That's what the donkey's for. So what do the rabbis compare that to? A person who believes in God and is serving God, doing mitzvahs, but at the same time he's doing all the worrying in his life. What are you serving God for? And then carrying all the suitcases of worry yourself. Put the worry on God. You're serving him anyway. So why do people do that? Because they're making God so small. That's why they're doing it. I gotta help out God with, you know what I mean? Like, I'll carry the worries, God. That's the point. Okay. So we need wisdom to find wisdom. And when we have the wisdom, then we can enter into the palace. Then we can enter into the letter Bays, the house of this world. And then we can have the wisdom to understand what this world is for. You know, in Hayom Yom today, the Lubavitcher Rebbe brought this idea that a lot of people think that the true pleasure and the service of God really comes in the next world. And what they miss is the fact that you can actually experience the next world in this world. That people in the next world, souls in the next world, wish they were in this world. That they would be able to serve God within the context of a body. Because at that point, it's sort of like you earned it and you're enjoying it and it's great, but to be able to really
You can't do mitzvahs up there.
and you can't overcome challenges in order to serve God. You know, can you imagine two souls who are actually basking in the greatest, highest light of Hashem? And one says to the other, but do you remember back in the day?
The good old days.
When we had to overcome challenges
When we had bodies.
and we were surrounded by darkness
When we had bodies, we had to fight.
and we did it anyway.
Yeah.
I tell you something, I had such a moment last night. It was such a great moment. I was in my pajamas. I think I already said the Shema. I'm not sure. I may have. And then I remembered. I didn't say Kiddush Levana, and this is my last chance. And I put on a jacket over my pajamas, and I stepped outside my house. And I was so tired. And I was so like, oh no, I don't really want to say it. The whole Kiddush Levana right now. It's cold. And I did it, and I was so happy. It was the best.
That's great.
Angels can't do that. Or-
Yeah, and we won't be able to do
Right,
that.
we won't be able to do
We ourselves will not be able to do that. So now, just check the time. Let's do one more piece from Rabbi Avraham. So he has a hakdama at the beginning that, thank God I finished today. I've been spending the last few weeks on it. It's his introduction to the book. And it's a not so many pages, but when you learn word by word, and then you have to go over it again, it takes a while. So I got to the end of it, which I was really happy about. And he concludes with a drasha about from a pasuk in Vayikra. And this he's doing a whole overview of the universe, and then he gets hyper specific about the korban that we bring at the beginning of Parshat Tzav that rests on the Mizbeach all night. And there's a little letter mem, mokda. We say it every morning. In the Torah, the letter mem is kind of small. And it begins, God is speaking to Moshe and commanding him to command Aaron and his children. And he's saying that basically this is, just this special calling from God. It's a connection of above to below, and God is doing it in the most beautiful way, and they're responding to God with tremendous awe. And then it gets to this idea that the wood has to burn on the fire all day, all night. And it uses this small letter mem. And I always wondered about this small letter mem. And I never saw a good brush on it, and nothing ever came to me on it either. So here's what he says in part. He says that small letter mem stands for Malchus. It stands for this world. And why is it a little letter mem? Because what you're doing while the fire is burning all night is you're uplifting all the little pieces of this world. Remember, it's a small mem, and mem stands for malchus, which means this dimension. And he's saying that really our lives are about lifting up all the little pieces of this world and elevating them back up to God. And that when we do that, we create this fire which burns in the night. Meaning to say, remember, nighttime normally stands for exile. But this is the fire that burns in the night. This is the fire that lights up the darkness of exile. In other words, when we see God in all the little things in this world, what we do is we create a fire which lights up the night and sends this entire world back up to God. Now remember, what they're talking about in the Torah in this passage is the Korban Olah, which is where everything becomes burnt. Now what I told you in the very beginning, that one of his themes is that God made something out of nothing. He made this world out of nothing, right? And that what we do is to take this world and take the something and return it back to nothing. So it's very instructive that he culminates his whole introduction, his whole overview to the Torah, of returning something back to nothingness. That's the Korban Olah. And how do we do it? By seeing God in all the small things in this world and elevating it back up to God. And then it fills the entire world and lights up the entire world with love and yira. Ava and yira. Love and awe. Now, I just want to explain it so that, make sure that we're communicating. And this is one of my all-time favorite Hasidic stories. And I remember it being said about the young Ger Rebbe. So an older rabbi comes up to this young Rebbe, he's just a kid at the time, and says, I'll give you a penny if you can tell me where God is. And the young child says back to him, I'll give you 2 pennies if you can tell me where God isn't.
Ooh.
And I learned that in the early going of my Torah study. And I remember being so taken by that story. Because you hear it and you know immediately that the young kid got the better of the big rabbi. But I was asking myself the question, but why? What were they actually arguing back and forth about, right? So what did the older rabbi want the younger kid to say? He wanted him to say, I'll give you a penny if you can tell me where God is. He wanted him to say God is everywhere, right? But he said better. He said, I'll give you 2 pennies if you can tell me where God isn't. You see, that means that there's no place devoid of God. But let me explain it better. If you say God is everywhere, what's the problem with that? The problem is that the mind can't absorb infinity, which means at a certain point, if you say God is everywhere, the mind short circuits.
There's a limitation.
But if you go like this, there is no place devoid of God. That means God's in the fire, and God's in the cup, and God's in my arm, and God's in the chair, and God's in the beams, and God's in the concrete. So the idea of the small mem of taking the little pieces of this world and seeing God in all of the little pieces and elevating all of that we can do. And he says that when we're successful in doing that, and this is how he ends, because the next word in this passage from Tzav is the word Adam. We take the Aleph, which stands for God, Adam. Remember, there are 3 names for God. There's Adam, there's Ish, and there's Gaver. They all mean man. And Adam is the highest. So what is Adam? When we take the Aleph, which stands for God, and we attach it to Dam, which is our blood, which is our Gevura, then we sweeten all of the din. When we bring the highness of God down below to the level of our blood. You know what it means, our blood? That means our free choice. That means our confusion. That means the human condition. When we take the Aleph of Hashem and we attach it to our Dam, then everything becomes clarified in the world and the entire world becomes sanctified. Okay. Chaim.
Chaim, thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Reb.
We'll do Marv. If anyone wants to have a Marv, we'll do over to here. And then we'll get inside afterwards. Thank you.